I had the American bomber dead in my sights. It was a flying wreck, tail shredded, engines smoking, bleeding fuel into the freezing December sky. I was exactly one victory away from the Knight's Cross, the medal every Luftwaffe pilot would die for. My finger tightened on the trigger. It should have been easy. But as I pulled my Messerschmitt alongside to finish them off, I looked into their cockpit, and I saw something that stopped my heart. December 20th, 1943. By that winter, I was no longer a young, idealistic cadet. I was a veteran ace of the Luftwaffe, a man who had flown hundreds of combat missions from the scorching sands of North Africa to the freezing skies of Europe. I had shot down 22 enemy aircraft. I was 28 years old, but I felt like I had lived 100 lives. My face was lined with the exhaustion of a war that we were slowly, inevitably losing. I was stationed at an airfield near Oldenburg when the sirens screamed. A massive American bombing raid had just devastated Bremen. The sky was still black with flak smoke and the burning remains of the city. I scrambled to my Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6. My mechanic had just finished refueling and rearming it. I climbed into the cockpit, the smell of high-octane fuel and sweat filling my nose. The smell of the hunt. I took off alone. My job was simple. Find stragglers. Find the wounded birds that had fallen behind the protection of their formation and finish them off. It was a cold, mathematical business. You didn't think about the men inside. You thought about the machine. You destroyed the machine so it couldn't come back tomorrow to drop more bombs on your home. I spotted a dark speck against the white clouds. A B-17 Flying Fortress. It was limping, flying low and slow. I pushed my throttle forward, my engine screaming as I closed the distance. I was the predator, and it was the prey. I checked my gun sights. I checked my ammo counters. I was ready to add victory number 23 to my tail. But as I got closer, the predator's instinct in my gut turned into something else: shock. I had never seen an airplane fly in that condition. The tail was half gone. The rudder was swinging loose. The entire left stabilizer had been blown away. The fuselage looked like Swiss cheese, riddled with hundreds of bullet holes. I could see the daylight shining through the metal skin of the aircraft. The rear gunner was slumped over his guns, his fleece jacket soaked in blood. I pulled up alongside them, flying just a few yards away. This wasn't an airplane anymore. It was a flying coffin. And then I remembered the voice of my mentor, Gustav Rudel, from when I was serving in North Africa. He had looked me in the eye and said, "Honor is everything here. If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you down myself." I looked at that B-17. It had no defenses. The guns were silent. To shoot them down now wouldn't be combat. It would be murder. It would be shooting a man in a parachute. But I also knew the laws of the Third Reich. Sparing an enemy was treason, and the penalty for treason was death by firing squad. My finger hovered over the trigger, caught between my duty to my country and my duty to my own soul. I eased my Messerschmitt even closer. We were wingtip to wingtip, traveling at 200 miles an hour over the German countryside. Through the glass of their cockpit, I saw the pilot. He wasn't a faceless enemy anymore. He was a kid. He looked barely 20 years old, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. He was struggling with the yoke, fighting to keep that broken beast in the air. I saw the crew huddled inside. They were staring at me, waiting for the flash of my cannon. They knew they were dead men. They knew I could tear them apart with a half-second burst, but I couldn't do it. The code of the desert, the code of a decent man, screamed louder than the orders of the Führer. I tried to help them. I waved my gloved hand frantically. I pointed down toward the ground. "Land!" I mouthed the words. "Set it down! You won't make it!" The American pilot just stared at me, frozen. He didn't understand. I pointed north. Sweden. It was just a short flight across the water. Neutral territory. If they landed there, they would be interned, but they would survive the war. They would go home to their mothers. "Turn north," I signaled again. But the pilot, Charlie Brown, I learned his name years later, shook his head. He kept the nose pointed west, toward England, toward home. He was flying a dying plane into the teeth of the Atlantic Wall, the most heavily defended coastline in history. I realized then that if I left them, the German anti-aircraft gunners on the coast would shred them within minutes. They were flying low and slow. They were target practice. There was only one way they could survive. I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I didn't peel away. Instead, I tucked my fighter in tight formation right next to their wing. To the gunners on the ground, it would look like I was capturing the plane, or perhaps flying a secret captured aircraft. It was a bluff. A desperate, treasonous bluff. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was now shielding the enemy with my own body. If a German fighter squadron appeared, they would see a Messerschmitt escorting a B-17. They would shoot us both down without asking questions. If the Gestapo found out, my family would be executed. But as I looked at that terrified boy in the pilot's seat, I knew I couldn't leave him. For the next 10 minutes, we weren't enemies. We were brothers in the sky, united by the simple, desperate desire to stay alive. We approached the coastline, the jagged edge where the fatherland met the North Sea. This was the moment of truth. Below us lay the Atlantic Wall, a fortress of concrete bunkers and flak batteries designed to smash Allied invasions. I saw the muzzle flashes of the ground guns tracking us. They were ready to fire, but they hesitated. Through their rangefinders, they saw the silhouette of my Messerschmitt hugging the wing of the bomber. They must have been confused. Is it a captured plane? Is it a secret mission? Their hesitation was our salvation. We slipped over the batteries without a single shot fired at us. The bluff had worked. We were over open water now. The gray, churning waves of the North Sea stretched out endlessly before us. I looked at my fuel gauge. The needle was hovering near empty. I had escorted them as far as I could. If I stayed any longer, I wouldn't have the fuel to make it back to base. I looked over at the American pilot one last time. Charlie Brown stared back. The terror in his eyes had been replaced by something else, confusion perhaps, or a dawning realization that he was witnessing a miracle. I didn't smile. War is not a place for smiles. Instead, I raised my gloved hand to my forehead. I gave him a crisp, sharp salute. It wasn't a salute to an enemy officer. It was a salute to his courage, to his survival against impossible odds. Then, I banked my fighter hard to the left and peeled away. As I turned back toward Germany, I felt a strange emptiness. I had just let an enemy bomber go. I had let a machine that could return to kill my people fly home. I landed at the airfield with my hands shaking. My mechanic ran up to the wing, eager for news. "Did you get him, Franz? Did you see him go down?" I climbed out of the cockpit, pulling off my flight helmet. The cold air hit my sweating face. I looked him in the eye and lied. "He went down over the sea," I said flatly. "No claim, no witnesses. I never filed a combat report. I never told a soul." In Nazi Germany, mercy was a crime punishable by death. I buried the memory deep inside me. For years, as the war turned against us, as I watched my friends die and my country burn, I wondered about that B-17. It was so damaged. Surely it couldn't have made it back to England. I assumed they had crashed into the freezing water minutes after I left them. I assumed I had risked my life for ghosts. The war ended. Germany lay in ruins. I survived the final desperate battles, flying jet fighters as the world collapsed around us. I moved to Canada in 1953, hoping to leave the ghosts of Europe behind. I became a logger, then a businessman. I built a new life in Vancouver, far away from the flak and the fire. But I never forgot that B-17. For 40 years I wondered, did they make it? Did I save them? Or did I just prolong their suffering by a few minutes? In 1990, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I wrote a letter to a newsletter for American bomber pilots. It was a shot in the dark. I asked if anyone knew of a B-17 that was escorted over Germany on December 20th, 1943, by a Messerschmitt. I didn't expect a reply. But weeks later, a letter arrived from Seattle. The handwriting was shaky. It was from a man named Charles Brown. He wrote, "I am the one, and I have been looking for you all my life." We arranged to meet in the lobby of a hotel in Florida. I was nervous. I was the enemy. I had worn the uniform of the nation that had tried to destroy his world. Would he hate me? Would he spit on me? When I walked into the lobby, I saw him. He was old now, his hair gray, his face lined, just like mine. But I recognized the eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with terror through the cockpit glass. We didn't say a word. We didn't shake hands. We just fell into each other's arms and wept. We sat down, and Charlie told me the rest of the story. He told me how they had limped back across the North Sea on fumes. He told me how they had landed in England with barely a drop of fuel left. He told me about his life after the war, his wife, his 2 daughters, his grandchildren. He pulled out a photograph of his family and placed it on the table between us. "Franz," he said, his voice trembling, "look at them. They don't know it, but they are all alive because of you." I looked at the faces of those children and grandchildren. In that moment, the 28 victories I had scored as a fighter pilot turned to ash. They meant nothing. The medals, the Iron Crosses, they were just metal. But this was life. Charlie and I became best friends. We were inseparable until the day we died, just months apart in 2008. They called us the Brothers of the Sky. People ask me why I didn't pull the trigger that day. They ask why I risked a firing squad for men I didn't know. The answer is simple. In the sky that day, there were no Nazis and no Americans. There were only men. And sometimes, humanity is a higher call than duty.